when we talk about this game, we are going to need a little bit of context. The promotionals right now, what they have been focusing is on how creative the world and interactive the world and the combat system feels and works with you. So that's what they have been promoting. This game is called Eternal Strands, and it's from a kind of a indie company, Yellow Brick Games. So then again, we need a little bit of context on the mastermind behind all of this thing. And the mastermind behind all of this is Mike Laidlaw. There's a very, very talented team behind this thing, but I'm guessing that the credentials that we're going to be talking in right now we can trace them back to Mike Laidlaw, because I think that the promotional and the gameplay and the combat seems to some people to some extent a little bit generic. And it might be the case. To me it just looks amazing, but I think that they have something behind their sleeves that it's Mike Laidlaw. So then again, I digress. Let's talk about Mike Laidlaw. Well, he initially began working on the video game industry setting in Jade Empire under BioWare. In that, because he was such a good writer and because he was writing the story, that's mainly what he did. He was writing some elements and the creative setting of the worlds. Because of his ability and his capacity of being able to manage the rest of the writers, he was then promoted to some kind of a lead designer for the narrative and story. That being said, he did work in Mass Effect a little bit, but his real work comes to shine when it comes to Dragon Age, and that's where I think that we need to focus a little bit more, because if we talk about Dragon Age, there's some things about the franchise that some people like, there's some things that the people don't like that much. Like, for example, when we talk about 1, I think that's the perfect game, and then the second Dragon Age, a lot of people do not agree with how the combat took place. And you could say that in Dragon Age Inquisition, the MMO-ish kind of feeling of the open worlds did let down some people. Needless to say, those are amazing games. Those are some of my favorite games in the entire history of video gaming. But I think that what everyone can agree on how amazing those games were is in the narrative setting. Which, then again, remember that Mike Laidlaw was the mastermind behind the narrative setting of the Dragon Age franchise. This is where it gets interesting, because yes, you could say that that was the huge peak of Dragon Age, the setting, the world, the narrative, the writing, the lore, and it was all woven by Mike Laidlaw. He then credited at some points that it wasn't just him, and that's for sure. That's just a basic common thing to notice, that yes, he might be directing the narrative designers, the writers, the lore writers, but he was just weaving everything, and I'd say that that's a huge, beautiful worlds. Now, there was another project prior to the Dragon Age project, prior to the one that we have right now, that's been like working for ages, but there was another one prior to that. The thing is that BioWare at that time decided to scrap that project and move people over to Anthem. This is where you could say that the credentials of this guy and the integrity of this guy say something good about him, because we all know what happened with Anthem. They didn't care about that much of the soul of the game, but rather of the live services aspect. We know about the flop of that Anthem was. But at that time, the team that Mike Laidlaw was in charge on was scrapped to be moved over to this other project. And the Dragon Age game that he was working on, it was scrapped as well. So at that time, he decided to move, strangely enough, to Ubisoft. And in Ubisoft, he was working on a very cool project that in paper sounds amazing. He was working on a King Arthur game and the Knights of the Round Table. This King Arthur game was going to be kind of a monster hunting game with the setting of King Arthur. Now, let's talk a little bit about Ubisoft and why the directive kind of decision choices and concessions didn't really suit up the tastes of Mike Laidlaw. Because we could say that the Ubisoft titles are kind of a casual approach to gamers. And I do not say that in a bad sense of the words. I think that when I want to play something of a comfort kind of game, I enjoy Ubisoft games to some extent, but we know that they are just a whole bunch of rehashed titles of the previous things, and you have the basic core formula, where you have an open world with tons of markers, and you just get out there, and the games are always, at all times, holding your hands. There's nothing too special about the story, because then again, it's just rehash of previous titles that they have, like for example the Far Cry series. You have a tyrant, you have a world, you are kind of the hero, the underground hero that is supposed to overthrow the tyrant, and it's just the very same thing in every Far Cry game. When it comes to the Assassin's Creed, it's kind of like you have the hidden ones, you have the Templars, you have the Order of the Ancients, you have the Assassins, and it's always a thing where you have to go hunt them down one by one, but it's just the very same thing over and over again. So I guess that's what Ubisoft pursues when it comes to the overall setting of their worlds. Now, when Mike Laidlaw was working on this cancelled game, Avalon, it was called, if my memory serves me well, there were some conflicts in here when it comes to the world narrative, the setting, and the directives of Ubisoft, that at that time Mike Laidlaw just decided that he didn't want to work in there anymore, so he left, and the project was cancelled. So that project never came to fruition. So now, with Yellow Brick Games, you have this beautiful, beautiful game right here that they have been promoting on how the combat works and how interactive things are. We're going to discuss about all of that in a different video. But I'd say that what we should look forward to in this game is that the narrative aspect, the world setting, might just be a little bit more than what we can just initially see right here, because of Mike Laidlaw credits and credentials and the pedigree that he has as a writer, and leading the writers to create a compelling world that delivers an amazing, amazing story that is just complemented by how amazing the combat might not seem. Then again, let's remember that not a lot of people like Dragon Age 2 because of the action-oriented path that it took. But you could say, or at least I personally could say, that the story on Dragon Age 2 it was just amazing. The lore in the world of Dragon Age is just amazing. You could say that some people might not like how the MMO-ish kind of aspects and elements Dragon Age Inquisition has, but the story is on point. The story is just one of the best ones that I have ever seen, and it was all because the game had soul. So if you combine a game that has soul, that has an amazing combat system, and that it also has an amazing world setting with amazing lore and narrative, I'd say that we are here on a gem that it's something good. I mean, I think that this game could potentially be great, could potentially be a titan in the industry, and this game could potentially launch Yellow Brick Games towards a place where they can produce even more high quality games, because right now Yellow Brick Games is not that big of a company. As a matter of fact, it is being portrayed as an indie company because there's not too many people working in here. The company is very small, but I guess that the talents that they have behind here, it's from people that they can now do what they weren't allowed to do when they were working on these big companies, and that is where great games are born, because these are games that have soul, that have the passion of the developers, and that they can do what they want to do, what they envision something, what they the visage that they had for something to be produced and to be made. We are going to be covering this game quite extensively. We are going to be keeping close eye to this game. I'm hoping that you will be looking forward to this game as much as I am, because we're going to be talking about this in the channel quite a lot. If you like the content, like the video, super appreciated. And also, that you're a gorgeous and beautiful person, you're in the gorgeous and beautiful person. Have a lovely day, and goodbye.